This is Empire State of Baseball, and it's 2024 player rankings for Major League Baseball. And for our episode today, we are touching on the top 10 first basemen in all of Major League Baseball. Hello, everybody. This is Rich Rivera at Empire State of Baseball, being joined by my co-hosts, as always, Corey Favs, Joe Puglisi. We're one less today. We don't have Tom Waspel for today's big countdown episode. But, Joe, I'm so excited to talk first baseman for today's episode.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. This is the premiere episode of this series that we're going to do before the season starts. First basemen are going to start us off first position on the diamond that everybody thinks of. So, first baseman not quite as valued as they once were back in the day, but I think we got a good list here. And I'll say, about the top 6 first basemen are probably going to be everybody's top 6. It's the ones after that and just the order that a lot of people are going to debate, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, completely agree with Joe. The top 6, no matter where you check, are pretty much universal. Whether a podcast, the experts, whoever it is, everyone pretty much has the same 6, just whatever order they put them in. That varies slightly, and you will get to see ours today. Also, we have a homegrown New York first baseman that'll be revealed somewhere in the top 10 today. So keep an eye out for Mr. Pete Alonso on the New York Metropolitans. Maybe we'll see Rizzo. You'll find out in a few moments there. I know Rizzo once was an all-star first baseman as well. He's coming off a rough year with the Yankees, an injury-prone year with the Yankees. So we'll see if he ends up cracking the list. But Alonso will certainly be there somewhere. The question is where.
Oh, yes. And yes, I'm hoping that Rizzo finds his way, even if it's in the 10 spot. It's just unfortunate what happened to him last year with the collision with Fernando Tatis. And thus far, at the time of recording, Rizzo's having a fantastic spring training. So hopefully he keeps this up going into the 2024 regular season. He stays healthy. But yes, gentlemen, we are assigned to fill out our top 10 for the MLB player rankings, our first baseman for today's countdown. And let's get this thing started with three players that I want to touch on that are going to be filling out the 10 through 8 spots. And we're going to pull them up right here. There they are. We have in the number 10 spot, Nathaniel Lowe, also formerly known as Nate. And Nathaniel Lowe with the Texas Rangers, coming off that World Series championship in 2023, had a solid season, 262 batting average, 17 home runs. Not as great as his 2022, where he blasted 27 homers and a 302 batting average, but he was a Gold Glover, in which we are valuing defense at the same time. So looking forward to see what Nathaniel Lowe has. We also have Tristan Casas, of course, from the mighty Red Sox. Unfortunately, I don't see Rizzo in these first 3 here, so I think I'm going to touch on a Red Sox right now. But Tristan Casas has been awesome in his first 2 years with the Red Sox. I think last year was a coming out party, but I think Casas is on the verge of having a big season in Boston, and the Red Sox certainly need it. And with him and Devers on the corners, it's a really deadly corner infield in the American League East. And then we have Christian Walker. Christian Walker, again, I keep saying the word breakout, but this was Christian Walker's breakout season last year. A 258 batting average, 33 home runs, 103 RBIs, which was a career high for him. He's been a back-to-back Gold Glove Award winner. Actually, in the last 2 years, he's touched up for 69 home runs. Nice. But Christian Walker cracks this top 10 list. So I have Nathaniel Lowe, Tristan Casas, and Christian Walker. Fellas, when we look at these 3 studs here, Corey Favs, thoughts of these 3, did they deserve to make our top 10?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting list, and you got a guy who just got a ring in Nathaniel Lowe out there rounding out the top 10. So it's unfortunate for Mr. Rizzo. I know I mentioned him before, but I do think these 3, at least based on last year's numbers coming into this season, do deserve it. Like you said, he's having a phenomenal spring, Rizzo, so we'll see if he ends up continuing there. But I like the grouping, and I really just want to make one point, too, on Christian Walker, because this is a name that has been around for a while in baseball, but it feels like he's new to the league. And that's really because it's really only the last 2 seasons that he really started to make a name for himself. OPS over 800 both last year and 22, over 30 home runs both last year and 2022. So this is a guy, when you first think of him, it's like, oh, wow, it's probably like a 28-year-old. No, he's already 32. He's going to be 33 this season. So he is a veteran, just a late bloomer, played his first full season at the age of 28. So we'll see if he's still got some good hot streak in him. But I like Christian Walker rounding out this 8 spot in the top 10.
Yeah, and listen, this is an interesting grouping of guys. You have both of last year's Gold Glove winners in each league at first base in Christian Walker and Nathaniel Lowe. On this list, you have the third place Rookie of the Year in Tristan Casas that's on this list in this position. So you really have the 3 guys who are established in themselves. In Walker and Lowe, the interesting part is first base is not a defense first position, and these guys bring that defense to their position. Lowe in particular, we're going to focus on him for a second, had kind of an up and down last 3 years where in 2021 he had 18 home runs, 72 RBIs, hit 264. Last year in 2022, it looked like he was going to take that next leap and probably leapfrog up towards the top of the list. He had 27 home runs and he hit 302 and won the Silver Slugger Award in the AL. But this year was a little bit off, went back down to 17 home runs and 262 average. So the only thing I think with Nathaniel Lowe is we've seen that potential to rise up maybe to that 6th or 5th spot if he produces like he did in 2022, but he kind of fell off offensively while improving his defense as well. So he's an interesting case study. And listen, the Red Sox are very high on Tristan Casas. They think he's going to be their first baseman of the future. He's 23 years old. He had 24 home runs in 132 games last year. They expect big things with him in the middle of that lineup with Rafael Devers. And that's definitely somebody to watch for this year as he looks to improve.
All right. So we have another 3 that we have to touch on. And with our next part of the countdown, let's go to Joe. Joe, who do you have here?
All right. So first in the 7th spot is Yandy Diaz for the Tampa Bay Rays. This is a guy who plays both a little bit of third and first base. It looks like he is going to be the full-time first baseman going forward. He was a full-time third baseman in 2022. And in 2023, he played mostly first base, over 118 games there, won a Silver Slugger, is one guy who kind of flies under the radar. Most people don't think of him when they're thinking their top first baseman. Number 6 is a staple of the top 10 first baseman in the last, nearly decade, and that's Paul Goldschmidt, a guy who's going to be up there as a Hall of Famer, a guy who's going to be considered by many to be one of the best first basemen of his generation. We saw a little bit of a dip last year. Usually he's at 1, 2, or 3 on this list. He's moved a little bit further down to 6 after his MVP season in 2022. And then number 5 is our homegrown guy, Pete Alonso, the premier power hitter in the National League. 46 home runs last year, had a down year in terms of average on base percentage, but he is right there with the premier power hitters in the game, probably second only to Aaron Judge, and maybe one of the other guys on this list. But that's our 5, 6, and 7 list. And we'll go to Rich for your thoughts on who you'd like to focus on first.
Do you think the Cleveland Guardians are kicking themselves for giving up Yandy Diaz as part of that big trade that they had a couple of years back? And for those of you who don't remember the trade that Yandy Diaz was involved with back in December 2018, it was a 3-team deal between, the then Indians, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Seattle Mariners, where the Mariners ended up getting Edwin Encarnacion from the Indians. The Indians sent Diaz to the Rays. And the Indians, the best player seems like the Indians got in this deal, there's 2, Carlos Santana and Jake Bauers. So I think the Guardians are kicking themselves for letting go of Yandy Diaz. And it's so funny because looking at Yandy Diaz's profile, he doesn't seem like that typical first baseman. You would think the power numbers are there, and they're not. This guy's profile is more of like a middle infielder, but his batting average is sick. 330 batting average last year, 22 homers, 78 RBIs. He hit 296 the year before, 307 back in the COVID shortened 2020. He's been great for the Tampa Bay Rays, filling out the corner infield spots, but he has been a steady hand at first base for Tampa Bay thus far. Corey, how about you?
Yeah, no, listen, on Yandy Diaz, too, one quick comment, because we mentioned the top 6 has been pretty much universal no matter who you're asking, and Yandy Diaz seems to be that number 7. And the funny thing is, too, with all of us, again, to give a little background into how we do these rankings, each of us do our own positional rankings individually, and then we come back later, average everything together, and that gives you our list. Yandy Diaz was actually across the board all of our number 7, so he fit in perfectly in this spot. And going back to what you said too about the Guardians doing that trade, at least back then the Guardians were very competitive. They had a 102 win season that year, I think, where they made the trade. Obviously, things could have been different. They probably are kicking themselves a little bit there. But also on that list, want to call out Pete Alonso too. Again, homegrown guy, found his way into the 5 spot. The big thing with Alonso this year is when he makes that top 10 next year, because I'm confident he will, is it going to be with the New York Mets logo or is it going to be a different team? So I'll be extremely upset if Alonso is not with the New York Metropolitans when we do this episode next year. But right now, I got to tell you, I love watching him play because at any given moment, you could have a ball hit 450 feet.
And Goldschmidt, even, I'll just a quick touch note on Goldschmidt. It's just he had a decent season. I mean, but 268 dipped from 317, 25 home runs. He definitely was a little bit removed from that MVP season he had in 2022. But I tell you what, if the Cardinals get that kind of production out of Goldschmidt and even Nolan Arenado on the corners, again, talking about the corner infield and the source of power for St. Louis can find themselves right back into the hunt of the NL Central. Corey Faz, you have the next trio of first basemen to talk about. Who are we adding to the list?
Well, let's see. We're now into the top 4, final 4 of first baseman. Vladimir Guerrero gets the 4th spot. And for those of you who are into video games, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is the cover athlete of this year's MLB show. So we have a cover athlete now as number 4 on our list. And Vlad Guerrero last year actually had a little bit of a down year. 26 home runs, 264 average, OPS of only 788. You'd like to see those power numbers a little higher from Vlad. You want to get closer to that 48. I mean, you just go back two years ago in 2021. He had a 48 home run season, 111 RBI. The last couple of years, he hasn't crossed that 100 RBI threshold. We'll see if he could do it this year, but he does get that 4th spot. And I think the big reason why he's there instead of a guy like Pete Alonso was Alonso only hit 219 last year, very inconsistent. Alonso didn't really take off until the second half, and by that time the Mets season was already over. But Vlad Guerrero Jr. makes the 4th spot. Matt Olson for the rival Atlanta Braves takes number 3. And Matt Olson, I mean, when you think of premier first baseman right now in baseball, Matt Olson is arguably number 1 on that list. If you want to talk about power as well as overall balanced hitting is concerned, because 54 home runs last season, 283 average. I mean, the guy led last season in home runs and RBIs in National League. This guy's an absolute stud out there. And another guy, an Oakland traded player. Oakland, we know, always trades away these star players. Well, the Braves, I'll tell you what, it's very rare for a team, and I'm talking about the Braves for this instance, to lose your franchise player, Freddie Freeman, phenomenal first baseman, and to replace him with a player just as good as Matt Olson. I do think Freeman's the better player, but Olson definitely has the better pop. And number 2, another New York Mets rival in Bryce Harper. Really wouldn't expect to see him on first base list, but last year we know he was dealing with that arm injury, couldn't play the outfield, so he did play in a DH and first base last season. And Bryce Harper, listen, this guy is dangerous as well. I think he's very well deserving of that 2-hole spot. And the Phillies' success over these last couple of seasons, a big part of it, last year especially, Bryce Harper just doing his thing. So well deserving of the number 2 spot. Joe, what are your thoughts here on the top 4?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Matt Olson trades worked out for the Braves. He's also in the heart of that extremely dangerous order. Led the league in home runs and RBIs last year. Had his best year by far by coming over to the Braves. And he could be a guy that could get to number one if he repeats what he did last year. The guy I'm looking at is Vlad Guerrero Jr. We've kind of seen two different Vlads. You see 2021 Vlad, who could be one of the best players in the game, 311, 401 on base percentage with 48 home runs. And then you saw last year what seems to be around what Vlad's floor would be, which is 26 home runs and 264 average, 345 on base. And it's like, which Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are you getting? We know he has it in him. We know he has that level of being that 2021 version of himself. And if he is, he's the most dangerous, one of the most dangerous players on the planet. But we didn't get that last year. And we saw a regression from him in the last two seasons versus that 21 season. So we're looking for him. I'm looking for him to have a big year. I think he's going to step up. I think last year was about as bad a year as he's going to have. So, and even then it's not that bad. That wasn't that bad of a year. But at the end of the day, Harper, number 2, by far the fewest games at first base of anybody on this list, only 38 games at first base last year, coming off of injury, moving from the outfield. But the difference between Harper and everybody else is that clutch factor, is that it factor.
He's a gamer.
When your game is on the line, except for a couple of boys in Houston, there is no one I want up more than Bryce Harper, because he feeds off that. He feeds off the energy. He loves the city of Philadelphia. He embodies that city and that attitude more than any of them. He is by far the grittiest and most determined player on this list. Is he going to hit 54 home runs like Matt Olson or Vlad can or Pete can? Probably not. He's probably in the mid-30s, but he does everything else as well. He hits in the clutch. He hits to all the gaps. He can run the bases extremely well, and he is a dangerous hitter. So that's why Harper's in our 2 spot.
You would think the Yankees would have given up Oswald Peraza in a trade for Matt Olson a few years back. God forbid they actually ended up trading one of their blue chippers back then to bring in a first baseman who's been one of the best home run hitters in all of baseball. But nonetheless, Bryce Harper, though, it's incredible what this guy does. He's a beast. The way he's recovered from the Tommy John surgery, now adapted to the first base role on a full-time basis. I mean, I got to say, if you're a Phillies fan, you got to be loving the first 5 years of this contract that Harper's filled out for Philadelphia. He's done phenomenal work with the Phillies, and he's certainly lived up to the player he once was in Washington. I think he's actually better than the player he was in Washington at this point of his career. All righty. So we're almost through this list, guys. So we're at the number 1 spot. And of course, we are missing a big number 1. He was our number 1 on last year's rankings countdown. And of course, he's continued this success into 2023. And at 33 years old, I think he's turning 34 this season. Again, this player, 331 batting average in 2023, 29 homers, a 410 on-base percentage, a 976 OPS, just a few seasons removed from that MVP year. And of course, I am talking about Freddie Freeman, who is our number 1 first baseman in all of Major League Baseball. And again, I just talked about how the Phillies are happy with the Harper contract. So far, so good. 2 years in with the Dodgers, he's been incredible. He's averaged 328. He's hit 50 home runs on the nose in these 2 years with LA. He's still a premier. He's still a premier glove. He was a Gold Glover. He's doing exceptional things for the Dodgers, and it's so funny now going into 24. He might be the 3rd best act in the Dodgers lineup, in a scary Dodgers lineup. But Freddie Freeman fills out our list as our number 1 first baseman on the list. Corey Fabs, what are your thoughts?
I mean, Freddie Freeman, love watching him as a player. And he was a rival for the Mets for the longest time, always killed the Mets. But, I mean, he's just the model of consistently great. All right. And that's why he is the number 1 on our list, because he's just consistently great. And he always hits for average, a high average. I mean, you look at the last, 8 years, he's only hit under 300 once in the last 8 years. You want to know what that average was? 295. He just missed it. And he hit 38 home runs that year. So even though he missed the 300 mark, he actually had his most home runs ever that year. I mean, this guy is just purely balanced. In the last 5 years, again, OPS, my favorite personal stat to rank players is OPS. In the last 5 years, he's only had one OPS under 900. An OPS of 900 puts you in the upper tier of players. Freddie Freeman's been under it once in the last 5 years. He's actually had one over 1,000, 1.1, and that was back in 2020. That was the COVID year, so MVP season. So kind of a weird year there. But he is just the model of consistency. This guy is such a phenomenal player, and I honestly think he'll be number one on the list next year too, because the guy shows up, he plays every day. You're going to get 158 or more starts from him every year. Just get a day off here or there. This guy is a consistently phenomenal player.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Freddie is he's not going to light up the home run charts. He's not going to hit 45 home runs like a lot of the guys below him, but he does everything else. Does anybody realize that Freddie Freeman stole 23 bags last year? Does anybody realize that?
I just realized it now.
This guy had a 2020 season as a first baseman, contended for a batting title. I mean, he is the ideal hitter. He's led the league in doubles 4 of the last 6 seasons. Yep. He's incredible. He's a leader on and off the field. He is the most consistent. In the last 4 seasons, he's averaged 321, 410, and 540 slash line. That's unbelievable in this day and age. He is the modern. He's basically the modern version of what Don Mattingly was in his prime. The difference is Freddie has kept that well into his 30s now and shows no sign of sliding. And now he's going to be hitting between Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani, most likely. Protecting Ohtani.
Oh, man.
It's going to be unbelievable. He's the best first baseman. Anybody, listen, as a Met fan, I was dying to have somebody as talented as Freddie Freeman on my team. I always loved him as a player and appreciated what he did, even those years that Atlanta stunk. And he's just one of those guys that you wish was on your team every single time you see him up at the plate.
I'll tell you what, if he ended his career today, Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame. He's got
301, 388 for your career. Yeah, you're a Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame, absolutely. And again, only 33 years old and still has plenty of career left to put up monster numbers at that position of first base. Well, gentlemen, that will conclude our first ever top 10 ESB player rankings for 2024. Great list. I was still a little disappointed that Anthony Rizzo did not crack the top 10, but hey, you know what? There's the next year for Anthony Rizzo. All right, guys, I appreciate your time. Thank you for tuning in. That is the top 10 first basemen ahead of the 2024 season. Take care.